Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the CSR-A and Be Ethical webinar on measuring the value of social responsibility. Today, we're going to look at ESG. We're going to try and get a better understanding of ESG and how that sits with a CSR or environmental policy, a social value policy, and how organizations can look at the relevance to their businesses, to their organizations, and how they can align that with what they're doing and build the capacity to deliver it. What I'm going to do first is introduce Be Ethical, who have kindly partnered with us to deliver this. Be Ethical provide responsible business training, and we are defaulting to them for their expertise around the ESG agenda. So if I could ask Caroline first, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
So hello everybody, I'm Caroline Swales. I'm a co-founder and director of Be Ethical Training. We incorporated over a year ago, and we launched our training this year, which is something we're very excited to be delivering to businesses. I've been working in corporate social responsibility for too many years, nearly 15 years. So I felt like it was time to take that expertise and help other businesses understand what it means for them.
Thank you, Caroline. And Heather, please, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Heather de Groot, and I'm also a co-founder and director of Be Ethical Training. Myself and Caroline go way back when we started my career in corporate social responsibility with the family-owned business Bibiline Group. Caroline was my manager. And then throughout sort of my career there, we then both went our separate ways and did consultancy in CSR, and Caroline and myself have been supporting each other. Also when we became mums and through the pandemic as well, and Be Ethical Training was just born out of our passion to get CSR far and wide to SMEs and businesses across the UK and beyond. So that is our mission, to do that, and also to raise vital funds for our chosen cause as well, which is Girls Out Loud, to help other young women across the UK become entrepreneurs and find their voices as well. So that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Heather. And Jennifer, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, please.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Jennifer Clark, and I'm the operations manager at CSR-A. We do some CSR training as well as accreditation and social impact report writing for organisations to get externally verified for all of the great efforts that they do. In a previous life, I worked in the construction industry with Skanska. I was global head of sustainability for them, trying to win work and be greener and reducing our impact on planet and promoting society.
Thank you. And finally, I'm Richard Collins. I'm the founder and chief exec of CSR Accreditation. It was our mission really to define a holistic framework for sustainability and to align that framework against compliances like ESG, also the SDGs and social value and so on and so forth. So it's about building those 4 pillars of workplace, environment, community and philanthropy that all organizations can identify with, look at what they're already doing. And I think this is key, that you're already doing these things, and then how you can use those things to deliver on areas like ESG. So I'm going to move the slide on to the first question really, which is a very simple question, which is, what is ESG? I mean, CSR and ESG are both excellent business concepts for the planet and for people. And ESG, we believe, is a scoring reporting mechanism with which to measure the impact of social responsibility policy. So CSR is a term that is used by all sectors and industries, whether an organization will be investing or investable or not. The term ESG is particularly employed by those in the finance and investment sectors who use the specified criteria as a measurement, performance and comparison tool. ESG scoring and reporting includes specific areas such as water usage, health and safety, tax transparency and so on and so forth. So what I'd like to do is kind of use the idea of social responsibility in ESG and turn to Be Ethical and ask, perhaps I can turn to Caroline first to sort of really, from a Be Ethical point of view, how are you defining ESG?
So for us, we use the terminology CSR, corporate social responsibility. I feel is everything that comes under responsible business. But for us, it's really helpful for our trainees and the people we talk to use the ESG framework. The ESG framework helps a business to really define in 3 different areas: environmental, social and governance. Now we look at how they build up an environmental framework, a social framework and a governance framework, and understand where there's crossovers and where there's gaps, but also how they then look at the activities that they are already doing and understanding why, which then helps them understand what their actual impact is. And then it looks at how you can fill the gaps of where you aren't doing certain things, so that you can create a balance within that framework. So for us, it's really important that the business views everything that's going on across their organisation from an environmental perspective, how their people are involved, how their suppliers are involved, how their customers are involved. And then from a social perspective, looking at it from the internal side and the external, so that you can look at how employees are engaging in your responsibilities and how your customers and external stakeholders are engaging as well. And then governance is all about the transparency and the business doing the right thing and being ethically responsible when it comes to everything that comes under responsible business. So ESG is simply 3 columns of activity, understanding what they are, what you're doing, what you'd like to do, the gaps, and then being able to measure them in each of those areas. Heather, have I missed anything?
No, it is. And the great thing about this is ESG is it gets you really excited about all the things you are currently doing, and there'll be plenty of things that you are doing, and this exercise that we have in our training helps you to understand all the wonderful things that you have been doing probably for a long time, but you've never formalized it into this framework. So ESG is a great exercise to get really clear on where everything sits, what you've got going on, and then also, as Caroline mentioned, the gaps. So where are the opportunities that maybe you can develop in the next 6 to 12 months or even further? A lot of people get a little bit concerned that if a new activity has to come in place, it's going to be expensive, it's going to take a lot of my time and resources on. Not necessarily. So we have a look at the low-hanging fruits that can help you to sort of identify something that's a quick fix in your business that will help you to step towards positive change and continuous improvement. You don't have to be doing everything perfectly. And I think throughout our training at Be Ethical Training, we don't want you to think that you need to be up there with the Unilevers or the Coca-Colas of the world and having to have departments and, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds put into this. It's simply small steps in the right direction to strive towards a better world, and ESG is that step to do that, to bring it all together and to make it clear. So it really is an exciting opportunity for a business to get it all in one place and to see all the fantastic things you are doing and all the things that you can be doing as well.
ESG simply helps you structure everything going on and formalize that activity, because we see things being done, incredible things being done by businesses, yet they don't know anything about the impact or the value that they're actually achieving from that. So ESG is just a great framework to start from, and then you can just adapt as your activities grow. So I hope that explains it all.
I think it's also worth saying that the banking and investment sector do use it as a scoring system. So you can go through an ESG framework and be scored and get an A+ or B++, C+, etc. And that gives the finance and banking sectors an indication on how investable you are, if you like. So, you know, it is used by those sectors in the terminology. And if you're a company that's buying out other companies or maybe bought out, it's an indication of how well your business is run, like Heather said, from a governance point of view, but environmental and socially. So it's sort of minimizing that risk of you know, how good a company you are to be bought over. But there are many organizations that don't need investment and are not going to be bought out, and they probably use the word CSR, although they're very, very similar.
Yeah,
I think it's also worth mentioning, because we have a couple of partners that we talk about ESG investing with, you know, for funding and investment. And one of the things they say is obviously if a business is looking for funding and they're doing fantastic in each of these areas, they don't really need investment, he said. So it's quite nice to see when there are gaps and you see businesses actively putting their hands up and saying, yes, we're not doing great in this area, but we are going to put something in place to do better. He said that's really exciting for an investment and funding opportunity, because it's identifying that they understand where their gaps are and the things that they like to do, where they want the money to invest in or the funding to get better. So whereas everyone thinks, oh, we need to be doing fantastic things in every area, if you're not, it's also really great to be transparent and honest about that by saying we are falling short in this area, but we are looking at different ways to improve that. And that's also like a really exciting thing to say. It's nothing to be ashamed about. If the E isn't strong for your business, you should identify that, put your hand up to it, and then put steps in place to how you're going to improve it. That for an investment or a fund person who wants to invest is a really strong message for them. They're really attracted to those businesses that have identified that as well.
It also helps people see, businesses see that ESG, if you look at each pillar as 100%, you've got 300% to play with. Now, there's ratings and weightings that are assigned to each area from an investment perspective. And lots of businesses believe that CSR is just fundraising and volunteering and giving money away and being community focused. But actually, that's only 20% in the social. So there's a big job to do when it comes to understanding quite clearly what the other 280% looks like for your business. So ESG helps you to do that.
No, that's great. And just while I can, if you would like to put questions in the chat, and thank you, Gareth, for your question, we will come to those. We're going to leave 15 minutes at the end to address those questions. So please do put your questions into the chat. Listening to you both speak, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's creating a framework that kind of allows you to kind of look at your organization. But, you know, what about greenwashing? I mean, because at the moment there was a report only a couple of days ago that suggested that, something like 60% of organizations kind of like make up some of the impacts that they're doing when it comes to environmental sustainability. How does ESG perhaps kind of, how do we support, we talk about evidence and transparency, but how do we support what we are doing as an organization with regards to that ESG compliance?
I suppose it's who's making up the numbers, who's saying what they're doing. For us, our the basis of what we offer is to get the feedback and get the input from all stakeholders. So actually you can only greenwash if you're only talking about it from sort of a level that isn't communicated down into the business. It's really important that you've got two-way mechanism for all of your staff to get involved. They've got the best ideas. They're more efficient than us because they're on the ground doing the jobs. So it's really important to make sure that at every single level people are involved in the process and taking ownership of the actual activity. Greenwashing, it's easy to tick a box. We're not about tick boxes. We're about actual impact. And that's why people need to take this seriously, because they won't get away with it for much longer.
No, they will not. No, as Caroline said, it's totally about ownership and accountability. It's about capturing the data, making sure how that data is audited. So it's not just, oh, we have those policies and procedures in place. Great, tick box. It's about how often are they reviewed? How often are they updated? What sort of training and continuous improvement mechanisms are around those pieces of work? It's about authenticity. It's not just about slapping a green stick, a green tick on something. It's about that messaging behind it and how much thought has gone into it. I read a really interesting article the other day about, because a lot of these things are consumer pushed. A lot of consumers will get packaging and saying, I don't want this plastic packaging anymore, or I don't want it like this. And a lot of businesses are having a look at down their supply chain. But it can be a piece of work where you're saying, okay, well, if I fly that piece of wooden cardboard over from there, or I get that plastic from there, what's the carbon footprint of me flying that from over there, from me getting it locally from a local supplier? And as long as that plastic is recyclable in a certain way, what is the best? But as long as you've done that research and then you're being honest and transparent with your consumers and saying, yes, we looked at that, but actually that has a more that has a harmful footprint on our planet compared to this one, because we've done that analysis, we've done that research. So interestingly enough, the cardboard might not necessarily be as environmentally friendly as something that's sourced locally. So it's really interesting. But it is that sort of authentic thought process that's gone behind it, and then being really transparent and honest with with your stakeholders. to identify why you've chosen that route as well. But Caroline's completely right. You will not be able to get away with just greenwashing stuff anymore.
Especially when it comes to investment. I mean, in the future, ESG investment, they'll just laugh you out of the bank. I know that you don't go into a bank, but you know, it's really important that businesses are transparent, and it's storytelling as well. It's about proof. It's about all of the things that you're doing are being reinforced through all of your messaging, all of your content, all of your communications, you know, and it's about seeing those faces of those people that are actually involved in this process, and not just being black and white numbers on a sheet, because again, you know, you've got to have the basis of where that number came from.
No, thank you very much. And I think what we've kind of understood as well with the 4-pillar framework, which, you know, is that kind of holistic framework that allows you to look at what you're already doing. Because the interesting thing about ESG is who's auditing, who's benchmarking, who's recording, and are you getting a consultant agency to come in and deliver that, or is there a way that you can start to pull that together yourself? Because as we've suggested, you know, ESG can be for the big international organisations, and very often currently has been, but we're starting to see the ESG agenda pouring down, coming into the SME sector, and challenging people in retail, you know, the B2C, the B2B markets, within supply chain and so forth. So the 4 pillars is a framework which you can build your social responsibility policy strategy around. And I think the thing is ESG can't exist unless there's a social responsibility policy in place, because otherwise you're kind of grabbing at straws a little bit. So ESG measuring tool, you know, describes the performance of an organization's social responsibility. And what we've tried to do here is kind of look at those 4 pillars. Environment, obviously, if you look at your business, you know, what's your business doing? So, you know, does your business have a waste management program? Do you have a cycle to work program? Are you not using single-use plastics? Are you, you know, engaging in energy performance change and so on and so forth? Workplace, you could be looking at apprenticeships, you could be looking at diversity, inclusion. The community is about engaging with your community, investing in your community, local investment, local recruitment, and philanthropy, as we said, is about supporting your business by creating the purpose and value by engaging with charities in allowing your staff to volunteer or raise funds. So we've kind of got those, and I think most organizations can look at those pillars and say, yes, there are things we're doing in those pillars, and some are unique to us and some are general. What we try to do is say, well, look, actually, if you're doing this, they already match against that ESG agenda. So it's quite easily to say, well, actually, under environment, which, you know, the general kind of criteria for ESG governance, ESG reporting, is under the environment, biodiversity, climate change, innovation, pollution, resources, and water usage, or, you know, under social animal welfare or customer. So the thing is, there are things that you think, well, what's that got to do with us? But in fact, actually, when you look at any organization, looks at what they're doing against those 4 pillars, very similar to the SDGs, you find that you are delivering and you can align. So again, you know, I'll come to you, Heather, in terms of thoughts about that. I mean, if we look at those pillars and then look at how they can map in with an existing CSR program, I think this kind of shows how this isn't something that's scary or frightening. That is something that we're already doing, aren't we, at some level?
Yeah, you're right. I think as we've sort of done our own research building Be Ethical training, because we do focus on the SME market, it's all about demystifying and clarifying and getting clear. There's frameworks and policies and language and the COP26 and all these, the green tax and everything that's coming in, that feels quite overwhelming for an SME or a smaller business that has only just survived the pandemic and, you know, trying to keep the lights on, and then now is fighting for business or funding and is looking dead at this. But it is just taking those small steps and just sitting back and thinking, okay, let me engage my workforce now, let me speak to my teams, and let me pull apart in these pillars what we're currently doing. Let's just identify what we're already doing, and you'll see some surprising results, and also some things where you'll go, we've got that in place already, but we're just not mapping or measuring the impact. What can we do to change that? Okay, it's a simple staff survey, or it's simply putting something in that system already to, you know, create a database to capture that figure. And then there's the carbon calculator, which, so for example, cycle to work. So we can, from a staff survey, we can get an average how many miles our staff are cycling to work a month. We put that into the carbon calculator, and that will show how many carbon, you know, our carbon footprint we're saving. There's little things like that that you can currently be doing, and it's about not getting overwhelmed by it, but seeing it as an opportunity to showcase and celebrate all the great work that your business is already doing and engaging your staff in that. And it's so important to engage your staff, because if they feel empowered in the process to build this, then when you come to launch it and sell it out into your communities and get new business, they will do it for you. They'll become your biggest advocates, and they'll, you know, attract new talent as well. They'll attract new business because they've built this with you. So I really advise, if there's any senior teams on this webinar today, that this process, you incorporate your teams into building it as well. But don't get overwhelmed. Listen, me and Caroline are always there if you need to drop us a line, but it's just see it as a really exciting opportunity to engage your staff and your stakeholders to do this, because it really is, because it's only, you know, it's only striving towards a better world and a better community and better business for you, which is only a good thing. So yeah, but having things like this in place, a framework and a structure, will help so much.
So this is essentially, this is good practice essentially then, whether or not you actually need to publish ESG scoring as part of your report accounts. It's actually a good practice to do, you know, because we don't know what's coming around the corner in the future in terms of legislation and kind of impacts and so on and so forth.
No, not at all. Because if your business is a startup, or if you're halfway through your journey, or wherever you are, there might be a point where you do want to sell, or you do want to look at funding, or you do want to look at investments. If this is already business as usual as you, how competitive are you already? Like, you're so ahead of the curve. Like, large organizations, like we have them in our peer groups, we've been talking to them, you know, on a weekly basis. They're still a little bit unsure about all this. So having the SME community on board and doing this, you're already well ahead on doing this. And it is just best practice. But as Richard just said, this legislation wise is gonna change. So being ahead of that is just great, isn't it, to manage your risk?
I think in addition to the...
Sorry, Jennifer. Sorry.
I think in addition to legislation, just social pressures. So there's a statistic that says 94% of Gen Z expect organisations to tackle social environmental issues, whether it's legislation or not. They expect that of a company that they buy anything from, or eat in restaurants, or whatever. And I think that Gen Z coming through, you know, we need to be taking that into consideration to our own businesses if we want to attract the best talent of the next generation. Sorry, Caroline.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I always find it quite interesting when I work with clients on a consultative basis, and they're still confused and worried and concerned, and they know they've got to do it. And I'm like, this is common sense. So I've changed CSR into common sense reality. What does reality look like? And let's use our common sense to make our ESG framework. Let's have a really casual conversation about this, and let's get the details of it together, and then let's expand from there. I could go into a business on day one and come out with an ESG framework, some metrics, some people who are going to take ownership of it, and look at setting up a forum and a material asset area for everything that's going on. And that could be done in a couple of hours. But it's just those like facilitated conversations that help people to really understand what's going on. You know, the Gen Z stat, that is actually quite phenomenal, and they are going to save the planet. They are going to be the reason that our future generations live in this planet, because they're so committed to it now. Businesses have to make this normal. They've got to, otherwise they're not going to be able to employ, they're not going to sustain, and more so than sustain, they're not going to be able to regenerate anything. So for us, you know, it is about getting it right now, and then the future generations will just keep making it better.
So you talk about businesses, and Heather touched on the SME agenda, but I mean, of course, is this something that, you know, charities should be looking at? Is this something, you know, that non-profits, is it something that public sector organisations should be looking at?
Oh, most definitely, yeah, because this is the language of the people they want to engage. So working in the corporate sector for so long, when I came out, I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to go into the third sector. I'd love to go into the third sector from my corporate background and become a corporate fundraiser. And I found that I really struggled to get into that sector because my language was far too corporate. You go into the third sector, they don't want to hear about business plans, and they don't want to hear about how you run a charity like a business. But unfortunately, you do need to run a charity like a business, because at the end of the day, you have to make a profit, so to speak. You have to hit your fundraising target to survive, to provide for your service users. So speaking this terminology and understanding where not only your operations as a charity operate like this, but also where your services fit into this will make your offer so much more adaptable and palatable when you come to speak to corporates. So if you go into a corporate and you say, my business is hitting ESG internally, our operations, because we do X, Y, and Z, but also as the services we provide for our clients, our service users, sorry, that's my corporate terminology, our service users fits into this ESG area for you. And it just makes it so much easier for a corporate to go, yeah, there's my donation. Yeah, that's where I sign up because I can see where that fits. Now, throughout our training as well, we get our trainees or our businesses to align this ESG framework to their own values as a business. It's very important that they understand that where ESG fits into their purpose. So we get them to align it to their corporate values. So that'll be the same as well. If a third sector or a charity is looking at developing an ESG strategy, they'll know that it will be fitting in with those corporate values as well, which again would make it easier for them to hopefully make a partnership with a corporate because the fit just fits in well. So 100% ESG just has to be business as usual in across a lot of sectors, I think, for the terminology and the language.
And is ESG top down, or is it something that should be inclusive throughout the organisation?
Go on, Caroline.
ESG doesn't exist without people. People are what run businesses. You can't tell a group of people to do something and achieve things without them being part of the commitment. The commitment comes from every level, whether that's 1 level or 6 levels, who knows, within businesses. For me, it's two-way communication all the way, because as I said before, you know, the people in the business know the business. The people who are the stakeholders outside of the business are asking the business what they need, and they're informing that business of their needs. So they're actually helping them build their ESG framework, because you're going out and you're looking at industry charities, you're looking at local community projects, you're looking at you know, the things that are going on from a council perspective, social mobility and access to different sort of networks. You know, if you don't talk to all of these different stakeholders, you won't be able to be authentically informed. It'll all just be very sort of TikTok again, which is it's sad to see when that happens. You know, people saying, oh yeah, we do, and I'm a bit like, prove it.
There's also, like, you've seen examples in businesses, Caroline, in our consultancy careers, where you as consultants, you just work with the board, and the board made the decisions, or sorry, the senior team made the decisions, it's signed off, and then it's launched. And then they wonder why there's no engagement from the employees and no buy-in. It's because they weren't involved in the building of it. They don't feel connected to it. They don't have any ownership of it. And I do think that there's a place for senior teams to make decisions on legacy pieces. For example, if you're a family-owned business and you know that your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th generation of the family are coming in and you want to engage that, then that is a top level decision, because that's a family-owned business decision. But at the same time, when it comes to charities of the year, or if it comes to environmental initiatives, like all of a sudden there's loads of recycling bins in the canteen and the office, and it's, you know, taking up loads of space, cause absolute chaos, can't it? Like, if they're not involved in the process, you'll find that the walls just start going up and the engagement isn't brought in. So although it has to be led by the top, it has to be built from the bottom up. It has to have that engagement, and then, you know, led from the top, so that it's feels like it's taken seriously. Obviously, if your MD or your FD or whoever at the top is leading the way on it, then it shows the rest of the employees the importance and the focus and the value to it across the business. How it works well in businesses, it's incorporated into employee personal development, also a part of their appraisals or a part of their personal development training. It's kind of integrated in that, so it makes them feel that they're valued and listened to throughout the process, but it's also integrated in their professional development in the business. So I know in previous organisations we've worked in, we've had the values in the appraisals, and then every time we have an appraisal with an employee, we say, how are you living the company values? But the values are already integrated into the ESG, so it all falls really nicely into the culture of the business, the common golden thread.
Recognition is a huge part of this. You've got an internal recognition programme that shows the commitments that have been made and the people that are part of that, you know, achieving those commitments. It does a lot for that organisation to see those that want to get involved and those that are taking it seriously. So internal recognition is always good as well.
Yeah, and we always say with CSR that, you know, it's the way in which organisations can enrich the quality of lives of their staff by allowing social value to be part of their job description. So building it in right at the recruitment stage. Earlier on, Jennifer alluded to risk, and I think one of the, you know, from the origins of ESG in terms of the incidence of the finance sectors, that actually there was this idea about, you know, ESG being a way to measure an organization's social value and sustainability in order to mitigate risk. You know, so in order to manage the risk posed to your organization, where should you invest, for example? A sustainable and responsible business must future themselves against emerging trends and evolving societal expectations. Externally, this is mitigated by brand reputation management and securing contracts and customers through positive culture and authentically living your organization's values, as we've just said. But I think, you know, there is that mitigating risk, and that's, you know, internally that will have an impact on recruitment, on retention. It will have an impact on attracting investment, as we've said, on tendering trends, and ultimately leads to an organization, you know, forging essential bonds with all stakeholders, internal and external. So I think the thing is, it's important to see that, you know, if you're a business and you know, as you've said, Heather, you're an SME, you've just started out, but in 5 years you go for a merger or an acquisition or whatever. The thing is, or you're going to be, you know, bought by another organization, and then they find that, you know, you're a small printing company, and they find that actually you've been putting your waste into the local river or whatever it is, and therefore that suddenly, you know, that the damage of your reputation, the damage of the impact, the negative impact you're having to the environment and possibly to your workforce, that obviously then massively devalues the value of your organization. And so I just wanted to touch on ESG as being a very good risk management tool as well, in terms of, you know, mitigating those future societal expectations and making sure that you're complying to up and coming regulations and legislation.
I think having a CSR strategy in place shows that you're looking at procedures and processes and impact and numbers and data, and this is all risk management. It all supports the risk of the business. So, you know, if you're a business that's really like committed to having a central point of data capture to be able to then circulate that information and promote it positively, it encourages more people to look at you as an ethical business. It helps your employees fly you as an ethical business. There's your recruitment sorted. You know, it also helps people see that they can be transparent and they can be open and honest, because that's part of the ethics of the business. So this is all part of the risk management. I think, you know, once you say, yes, we've got to do this and take this seriously, you start to have that two-way communication with everybody across the business. You let everybody be part of that conversation and let them inform, which gives them, you know, sort of loyalty, and it will definitely strengthen the position of your business. You know, these awards programs where they interview the employees to see how well they fit within the top 100 or whatever that is, you know, CSR makes up a big part of the positive feedback that comes from that. So I think the risk management side of thing is, it's really important to say this is part of our business as usual, and we are embedding this throughout as a we're creating a culture of responsibility to, you know, to mitigate risk. I think that's what it is, you know, for me. I don't know, has anybody else got anything to add to it?
Yeah, another example, just to give an example on this, Costa Coffee, their biggest risk is turnover of staff, and the amount of training that they spend is millions on training staff. So if they can, by using CSR or ESG, you know, encourage people to stay longer than 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is, then they mitigate that risk by ensuring, you know, career progression. You join Costa Coffee for a career, not just for 6 months over the summer. And then they reduce their costs on training. They, you know, retain good staff. So in terms of investing in this CSR elements, you know, showing that they're a company that cares, showing that they're a company that looks after the planet and their staff, people will stay longer. So it's engaging risk managers who traditionally might not see CSR as a tool in their toolkit to minimize the risk, you know, spend in order to minimize the costs potentially down the line. So I think it's that investment around CSR that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the risk register, don't we? And the fact that, maybe part of that ESG, framework is having that risk register. So, you can then say, well, what is the risk of our business, having, polluting or having a negative impact on the environment? And, the damage through brand, through misuse of natural resources, either directly, and actually not measuring or reducing your environmental footprint with COP26 coming up and the race to zero, businesses that aren't actively doing something to address those areas. And I think, having that kind of risk register, you can apply that, to the CSR 4 pillars, and therefore you can then add that to your ESG, scoring as well.
I think it's great to have a strategy, obviously, because you need to know what direction you're going into, and you need to know where your current position is. And it's great that it's led by the top. It's within your risk, management systems and whatever you've got in place. But it's so important that there's someone actually doing the do. There's someone who's accountable to making sure that what you've got in your strategy is actually happening. So myself and Caroline, as consultants, many times have written lots of strategies over the years and handed it to the business, and then it's just fallen short because they haven't dedicated the resources or time of someone internally to actually deliver on the strategy. That's where we find a lot of the time it falls short. Now, a consultant is wonderful because they come in and they give their expertise, but they can't integrate themselves as part of your business, and this has to be a part of your business. It has to be a part of the culture, and that can't be done externally. That's why we've championed our training, because we take someone from within your business and we show them how to do, how to deliver on your strategy. So how to build it, how to write that strategy, but then how to deliver, map, measure and report on it. I think a lot of the time, you can get the senior teams can get excited about this. They might dedicate 6 months to it, and then all of a sudden the strategy's done, that one-page policy is written, it's up on the website, everyone's happy, and then it just goes. And then the employees don't know about it. They're unsure where everything sits. Where's that? Or it tends to be when a bid, a tender or award submission comes in and the whole place goes up in smoke because everyone's running around trying to find out where the latest environmental policy is, because there's 7 versions somewhere in 7 departments. So it's all about not just writing the strategy and knowing what direction you're going to and where you are now. It's about who in the business is taking ownership of it and coordinating it and making sure that you're all talking to each other and getting the impact right and getting it measured as well. So that's where we see it fall short.
I think that it's so important to identify the enablers within the organisation for it to be, integrated through the organisation. To perhaps, use those pillars to build that social policy, and then, but importantly, possibly to have that external consultant, that external organisation to come in to kind of have that helicopter view, so they can look at what you're doing. So you're not just, we often say with CSR-A, CSR great storytelling, but you can't have great storytelling without the story doing. And we need to evidence and show that story doing, and that has to be independently verified. And I think having the strategy to put together that social policy and then use that for your ESG reporting, because obviously at the end of the day, the ESG reporting is a scoring system that other organisations are going to look at and then assess your business based on that scoring. So I think it's important to get that framework in place. And I think, we've touched on this a little bit throughout the conversation, but, with regards to social responsibility, we know what the clear benefits are. I mean, we know the clear benefits are about that engagement program, recruitment and retention and all those things. But, and of course, the reduction of risk in terms of the ESG agenda. But I think, it's really important, isn't it, to say, look, there are, when we look at that framework, that holistic, sustainable framework of social responsibility, and how we use that to map our ESG, that this is about the clear benefits for business. So it is that return on social investment and that social return investment delivering you as a sustainable business, for the future.
Yeah, well, efficiency, it's cost saving. If you've got the right things in place that help you be more efficient, that consider different environmental areas, and you're going to save money. You're going to save quite a significant amount of money. Again, for a recruitment perspective, if you've got people who are really loyal, because we had people in Bibby who absolutely love that place and they still fly the flag high as they can for that business, even though they were made redundant. We being one of them, we love that business so much because of their commitment to us as employees to do and be support, to do the things that they asked of us, and for us to want to do them and be supported in doing them. So, you know, it reduces a lot of cost in a business if you can, when you get it right. But you know, your business it won't survive. You won't survive in the future, especially with that statistic when it comes to Gen Z. They're just not going to buy into a business unless they are transparent about what's going on from an ESG perspective. It just won't happen. And that will be sad to see, you know, because there's lots of business owners out there at the moment that are probably very profitable. But if they can't recruit in the future, you know, if their skills gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, their business is going to get less and less and less.
We have a lot of organisations that come to us saying that they're seeing questions more and more in tenders around CSR, and they don't feel equipped to answer them. And when we start to work with them, they realise they're actually doing a lot of it. They just either don't know it's CSR or they don't know how to package it up. But that's a real clear benefit for business, is if you've got a strong CSR story, statistics, commitment, then when your bids come in and they start to ask more questions than this, you're going to pick up those points that your competitors aren't. So it's really important message for winning future work.
Absolutely. Well, in the public sector, it can be 25% of a mark. And if you're going for £1 million contract, can you afford, you either win it or you have nothing. So let's get the answer to that question really clear and get the data and get the statistics, and let's win. But it's not just 25%, it's 1%, because you could be 1% less than the person that wins it. So if you don't get it clear, you don't win anything. And well, so much time is taken to complete those documents. It's a big part of your business.
And this is absolutely true, and of course this has a huge impact on supply chain. So again, you know, it's great to have that strategy in place, that framework in place, and that when you do bring that maybe an external auditor to come in and then deliver that ESG scoring compliance for you, so they can publish reports and then say, right, this is what your scores are, and other people can clearly see that. And then it's about using that to create relevance and authenticity and value in terms of your supply chain. Because what we're seeing as well is, you know, since the pandemic, there has been a heightened increase in appetite towards, you know, delivering on social value and sustainability, and how to measure that and use that measurement and reporting to you know, to build that long-term sustainability. And and especially within supply chain, as supply chains now look at each other, top down and you know, upstream and downstream, and they start to say, you know, should we be using this company? Because if you know, because your whole reputation might be based on the weakest link in your supply chain, who decided that they weren't going to behave responsibly, who weren't going to have policies in place, and then do accidentally end up in a situation which is reported in the local news or whatever it might be, and then that might come back to you as an organisation. So I think these are, you know, the benefits, and I like the way that you framed, because in the conversations we've had around ESG, it is largely been around the external positioning of an organization and not the internal positioning of an organization. So I think it is important, you know, that it's what you show your internal stakeholders, you know, your staff and your volunteers if you're a charity, and you know, in you know, the entire spectrum of whether you're, you know, local, private or public sector, that you know, you are doing everything you can.
If I can just add the clear benefits for charities, because I know we've got a few charities on the call, Lisa and Laura especially. But yeah, it's very important for charities to get grants by demonstrating their social impact, but also engaging with those corporates to show how a charity can support a corporate in delivering their sustainable development goals, but also their CSR programs to show the social impact. So I think the benefits for charities are twofold in terms of winning grant money, differentiating themselves, but also supporting those corporates.
Yeah, you just have to make it so easy for the corporate just to sign that check, to sign that partnership. And the fact that you've gone in there and you've already aligned your operations or what you offer to your service users against ESG, you're already halfway there and in fitting nicely into their reporting and into their strategy. And I think it's not just about the big check moments for corporates now. They want to know what the legacy piece is. So maybe offering them a package where once the money is donated, you know, you check in with them 3, 6 months later, 12 months later, and keep that, you know, say how their money is, you know, gone further and beyond, or if it wasn't spent exactly where it was going to, because, you know, that is the nature of the third sector. You know, emergencies come up and you need to move funds around. Again, that transparency and honesty with your corporates will mean that they can then share that with their consumers and their stakeholders as well. And I think it's building that trust, which is really important. But no, for the third sector, this is great value for them as well.
We talked about measurement of ESG. Sorry, Richard, we talked about measurement of ESG as a commercial entity within a third sector. But imagine if you can come up with some data and stats that helps actually fill in the ESG for the corporate as well. So it's like, this is what we've done as a campaign, and this is how many miles we've saved. This is how many trees we've planted, or this is how many people that we've got into different education programs, and you're then giving them impact results as well, which is really powerful for a charity to be able to do. You know, this commitment of £2,000 a year means that 4 people have gone into apprenticeship. Whatever it is, make sure that you say, this is what £1,000 does, this is what £5,000 does, this is what £50,000 does. It doesn't mean that the charity is necessarily going to do it with your exact money, but, you know, they're still able to say, this is what we're...
It's visualizing it, isn't it, for the corporate, like having that visualization for them rather than just, you know, the £2,000 going into a pot. I know with our chosen cause, we know that we're supporting one teenage girl in the UK to go through a specific program. And the nice thing about that is, hopefully when we have our first cohort of girls go through that program, we'll then have interviews with them, and we'll have the stories about how our businesses have supported them to find their voices. And then there's a whole piece where we might check in with them in 24 months time. They might even join our business on apprenticeships. Yeah, so it's just, there's just so much lovely long-term stuff. It's not just all about the short stuff as well. It's about what things you can offer corporates that gives them more of a legacy, sort of a chunkier piece of importance going to as well.
I agree, Heather, and I just sort of took that point when you mentioned that earlier, because we you know, of course, developing long-term relationships with the third sector is important. One-off acts of giving are almost pointless, because it's not just about that act of giving, it's about the engagement and the relationship and the benefit that both businesses, because charities can give value to businesses by providing purpose and value, and businesses can support charities providing the volunteering and pro bono. But it's not just about that, is it? It's about the fact that CSR/ESG agenda, this isn't one-off acts, is it, across anything you're doing? So you need to get those systems in place where monthly you're routinely looking at your waste, your energy, looking at your staff engagement programs, looking at your tendering, looking at your reputation, looking at your online presence. So it's a business strategy, it's a business act. It's not, you know, these things are no longer nice to have things, are they? This is essential to the success of a business.
Yeah, it's got to be part of your processes. And the great thing is our training almost teaches it as a habit. You know, you're capturing the data on whatever's appropriate for your business, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, or however you might report up. And it's the same for the third sector as well. What data can you provide your corporates with? Because it's gold dust to them. If they can use, what can they use in their reporting? So if you've got a particular corporate golden egg of someone that you would love to partner with, go and find out if they've got a CSR strategy online, go and find out what their sustainability report is, find out what their corporate values are, then come back and align everything you do with them. And then when you approach them, you're halfway there, because you've already aligned your strategy with theirs, which is just genius. If I know that if a charity approached me like that back when I worked at Bibby Line Group, it would have saved me a lot of time, because the work had already been done and it would have been quicker. So just that.
Thank you, Heather. And I want to leave a little bit of time for a few questions, and really just finish off that, you know, from a plug from our point of view, the CSR accreditation, accredited companies have already pulled that information together. They've benchmarked, they've recorded, measured, reported and communicated, and they can then use that to deliver their ESG reporting as well. So, you know, that framework we looked at earlier on is a great way of doing it. And of course, engaging with Be Ethical and the training that you're delivering, you know, again, like with those, helps you frame that And you know, the point of our partnership is that we have the same passions, the same concerns. We want to engage with all organizations to help them see that this is actually a very easy and accessible thing to do, that you have capacity to do it, that it's already in place, that you just need to put it together. The accreditation is one way of doing that because it's independently accredited, and that policy, that accreditation application you put in, can simply be transferred and put together as the evidence required for ESG compliance and reporting.
Definitely. You can either start your journey with CSR-A, start it with us. We all end up in a lovely cycle and circle because we're all striving towards the same thing. It's about getting clear on what you do now, and then getting that accountability to make sure that you're mapping, measuring, reporting. So that's 100% CSR-A. Exactly know where you are now, know how to report on it. And then Caroline and I with the Be Ethical training help with that whole accountability piece and how you keep the momentum and the sustainability of it going and the engagement up.
And it is about planning for future success, isn't it? It is about planning for, being resilient for that sustainability that we've referred to many times, and building a business for the long term, not just for now, and making sure that these practices, this behavior change, if you like, is something that's permanently embedded into all organizations. Jennifer, I thought we have time for a few questions. There's been a couple of comments in the chat.
Yeah, I've answered some of the questions in the chat, but there is one here from Fran, which I'd like to put to you all, really. Is the banking scoring system the uniform, i.e. the same for all, and how can she find it?
Well, it's different terminology, so there'll be different terms, but if you go onto Google and you just put ESG ratings and weightings, you'll find some good visuals that help you with the things that are weighted towards them. I've got a slide on it, but you'll get the gist of it. You'll get to see what they're actually looking for. We can share it after the webinar, Caroline. The slide that you had that we presented the other week. We can share that one. Yeah.
But I think in essence, the answer is yes, they have the same scoring system across the platform so that it's comparable, so that investors can compare one company with another company when they want to invest. So
yeah, just different terms, they're all the same, but there's just different terms, and some people that have no idea what that actually means. And then on another slide, they're like, oh, I do now. So just have a look at 2 or 3 and you'll get the gist of it.
Yeah, and there was a comment from Alex really about kind of, CSR, ESG, people start to glaze over, and mention they feel it's too costly and time consuming to go through. But of course, it's not costly and time consuming. It's an investment for a start. And actually, because as we've said, in many cases, in fact, in all cases, from our point of view, you're doing it already. So really, it's just a question of recognizing it and putting it together into that framework. And you can use those 4 pillars, and those 4 pillars can be mapped beautifully onto the ESG scoring system. So I think the thing is that what we try and recognize is, or try and encourage people, is that, this isn't an addition to something you're doing. It's not something extra. It's something you are doing, and it's just making sure that you can report it, and communicate it. And so it's providing you a roadmap, a toolkit, if you like, that helps you to recognize those things that you're doing.
And get excited about it, get excited and just watch the change as it takes place, because there's nothing more exciting than that. I've seen a business go from donating about £10,000 a year to charity to donating over £1 million a year to charity, and to see the difference in the people in that business and just the enthusiasm and the drive to be part of it. Just wait until you see the change, getting everybody talking, getting the alignment, really getting clarity about activities. It's an exciting thing to actually do.
Yeah, it's a total value adding process.
Yeah.
And I think what the glazy-eyed falling asleep thing is because there's just lots of terminology out there, CSR, ESG, but really it's kind of like what you want it to be for your business. It's your culture of responsibility. If it's strongly weighted on the E side, then great, because that's where, it's just, I think everyone thinks it has to be perfect, and it really doesn't. It just has to be, you're already doing it now. It's those small steps in the right direction and championing it and leading the way in it. If in your sector, if there's a particular pain point or a problem and you're tackling it with CSR in an ESG framework, you are already leading the way. to make a positive change, and that can only be great for PR, for awards, for funding, for raising brand awareness. So it's just a great way of doing business right.
And it's a nice way to finish off, Heather, as well, because I think there's no point setting yourself 100 goals you can't achieve. You know, pick on the goals that you can achieve, do them well, you know, and start at that point, because it's all about building capacity and identifying the drivers within your organization to make those things happen. And that takes time. It is a journey. You can't click your fingers and it happens, but you have to start the processes somewhere. So so on that note, I'd like to thank Be Ethical, Caroline and Heather, ever so much for participating in this partnered webinar. It's been an absolute education for me as well, because it's so important to understand where social responsibility sits, and then how ESG framework aligns itself with that agenda, and how organisations can look at those things and more importantly, as I say, pull together this information themselves, but it is important to get an external kind of perhaps sign off to endorse and verify that evidence that you're delivering, so that information is authentic and isn't a box ticking exercise.
Yeah, so, and you want to celebrate it. CSR-A helps you celebrate it. Yeah, definitely. You don't celebrate it.
Something to rejoice and be very proud of, and people that we know who've gone through the processes, who've become accredited or whatever, they are so happy when they've seen it for the first time and realize the impact they're making. And that really what it comes down to at the end of the day, the positive impacts that we make on making a better world to live and work in. And that's through using these frameworks. Jennifer, thank you also very much for contributing your information. I know Jennifer sat and helped work on our risk management programs for ESG. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you much to everyone who attended today. I hope that's been of use. As I've said, we will be in touch. We'll create the link for this webinar and make that available for everybody. And we will also provide some additional information to support that. And we do intend to continue this series. We'll be doing another webinar with Be Ethical later in the year, so do keep your eyes out.
Thank you.
And also just from our point of view, if you want to find out anything more about us, please visit www.csra-accreditation.co.uk. And Heather or Caroline, where we would go to find out more about Be Ethical?
Just go into Google and search Be Ethical.
Be Ethical, yeah. Yeah, we'll come in at the top, or try and write our names down and connect on LinkedIn.
Yes, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye-bye.